So hello everyone at home and welcome to another episode of TopTenz. I am your interim host Karl Smallwood, that's Karl with a K and Smallwood with a small and then a wood. And today we're talking about 10 ghost towns that could absolutely kill you. And as with all of the videos here on TopTenz, this one is based on an original script submitted to us by a member of our writing team. Or should I say, in this specific case, it was rewritten by me. Let's get to it. So there are lots of places on Earth that you're not allowed to go. Area 51, the Pentagon, the employees only bathroom of a Taco Bell. You know, stuff where real secret stuff goes down. But then you have places where you technically can go, but you're advised not to go due to the very real risk that going there might kill you. Here are 10 such places from around the world. Starting with number 10, Goma, Romania. Goma was once an idyllic Romanian village nestled within a fertile valley full of rabbits and cool plants. Today it's a toxic wasteland, so volatile the dirt itself could eat through the leather of the dress shoe, and it all started in 1978 when the communists in charge decided to, as people are wont to do, exploit the natural environment, in this case a large underground copper deposit near the town. Within just a year the whole area was covered in fetid waste that is rather paradoxically oddly alluring and beautiful, with the shimmering iridescent waters covering the town belying the lethality of its contents. Sort of like, a venomous snake or a guy on Tinder holding a fish. Factors that make the town a popular, if very ill-advised tourist destination, with people trekking from miles around to see the unnaturally colourful toxins coating every inch of the town. Speaking of the town, all that really remains is the spire of the church, which rises above the toxic waters that cover basically everything else, save for a few houses located higher up a hill that refuse to be relocated, with most of the buildings and infrastructure below completely submerged. The water, for the curious, continues to climb the surrounding valley at a rate of about 1 metre per year, because, they're still dumping toxic effluents into the lake. More recently, the toxic slurry has claimed the town's graveyard, which the authorities had promised to relocate and then just didn't. And while a graveyard saturated with literal toxic waste isn't a recipe for disaster, it's certainly the recipe for a very good horror movie. And understandably, the residents left in the town aren't happy that their ancestors are buried beneath feet of toxic waste, never to be recovered. Moving swiftly on. Number 9, Sultan City, California. Located in southeastern California, Sultan City was originally envisioned as a tourist trap, a resort city on the shores of a salton lake, a man-made saline lake created in 1905. The area flourished throughout the mid-1900s, attracting several celebrities, and was the tourist trap it was always meant to be. But nowadays the town is not so nice to visit. Most homes are either demolished or simply never built, and the lake, which you can really not call a lake, has become so toxic due to the salinity. So toxic, in fact, that it occasionally gives off a noxious rolling fog that can choke a fully grown adult human to death within minutes. And that is not hyperbole, as we're about to discuss, because the decline of Sultan City can be attributed to many factors, including lack of environmental regulations and adequate water management, but mostly to people simply just not giving a shit, which is going to be a recurring theme throughout this video. Rising salinity levels and contaminations have led to the total collapse of the local ecosystem, which means literally nothing lives there anymore, except for the most hardy animal of all, man. Because people still live nearby, with one massively ballsy resident called Naomi Vasquez stating in 2021 that she has to keep an inhaler in every room in her house in case the air suddenly and without warning becomes toxic and kills her. And in the same interview, Vasquez noted that she once was awoken by her husband in the middle of the night because she turned purple because the aforementioned noxious rolling fog had seeped in like that episode of The Simpsons and choked her to death in her sleep. Almost, and she was only saved because her husband woke up before her, noticed that she was dying, and woke her up. Moving swiftly on once again. Number 8, Whitton, Australia. According to numerous well-worn warning signs around the outback town of Whitton, the environment is so toxic that merely breathing the air could kill you, which sounds like hyperbole, right until you consider that the town was set up to facilitate an asbestos mine in the 1930s. Asbestos being, for those who don't know, one of the most horrendously dangerous materials on Earth, and one that, even when breathed in minute quantities, can give you one of the most aggressive forms of cancer known. After the danger posed by the asbestos was made known, Whitton was figuratively and literally wiped off the map, with the whole town and surrounding area being cut off from the power grid, the town being erased from public ordnance maps, and the aforementioned signs being erected telling people to maybe not visit, which hasn't exactly been effective at deterring people, given that the area of land deemed dangerous by the government is roughly half the size of Singapore, and shortly after being closed off forever, literal mountains of toxic asbestos were mysteriously dumped in a nearby valley frequented by Aboriginal people, who are understandably all kinds of pissed about the whole thing. Just like a horror movie, the danger is slowly spreading, with the lethal cancer-causing asbestos microfibers being continually blown outside the confines of the quarantine area, something that is exacerbated by the ever more frequent wildfires the country of Australia keeps experiencing. Wildfires the town is uniquely immune to due to the fireproof qualities of asbestos, meaning the tried and true method of killing it with fire is wholly ineffective on the country-sized mass of undulating asbestos that is slowly making its way across the outback. Despite being in desperate need of a clean-up, Whitton is of low concern to the Australian government, with much of the heavy lifting to safely dispose of the acres of asbestos-covered dirt falling to charities. Moving on once again, number 7, Pitcher, Oklahoma. Located in Ottawa County in northeastern Oklahoma, Pitcher was once a bustling mining community founded to get lead and zinc out of the ground. Lead and zinc, which was important for the war effort and used to make weapons to kill Nazis. However, as mining activity declined over the years, the population steadily dropped, and in 1967, when lead and zinc mining stopped completely, the mines began to fill with water, leading to environmental contamination throughout the region. Are you starting to notice a trend yet? It's always mines. In response to put it lightly, concerns about the dangers the heavy metal contaminated water pose, the US Environmental Protection Agency, henceforth shortened to the EPA, declared Pitcher uninhabitable in 2009 with a buyout program for residents to relocate. For residents who didn't want to relocate, Mother Nature lent the federal government a hand, sending in a Category 4 tornado that leveled much of the town a short while later. Damage that wasn't repaired because why would they? Still, some people continue to live in the town for years after the rare but rather lethal combination of a man-made and natural disaster working in tandem all but destroyed the town, including a guy called Gary Lindemann, who continued to run the town's only pharmacy until his death in 2015. For the curious, at the time of his death, Lindemann was literally the town's only resident, which begs the question, who was he selling stuff to? But that's a story for another day. Moving on, number 6, Namie-machi, Japan. Namie-machi is a ghost town in Fukushima Prefecture in Japan. It was once a thriving settlement with over 20,000 residents, though everything changed on March 2011 when Japan was struck by an earthquake and a tsunami. The disaster led to meltdowns at the Fukushima nuclear power plant, resulting in a load of radioactive fallout. You probably remember some or all of this from the news at the time. What you might not know, though, is that in April 2012, the town was divided into 3 separate zones based on the levels of radioactive contamination contained therein. Over time, zones 1 and 2 were declared to be safe, at least safe enough for people to start considering returning to. Zone 3, on the other hand, the most contaminated area, is still strictly out of bounds. That said, residents and rubberneckers from across the world can still explore the so-called no-go zone. In a sense, thanks to, of all things, Google, who sent one of those Google Street View cars on a jaunt through the most contaminated areas of the town. While the area is still strictly off-limits, some brave, and others would say foolhardy photographers and tourists have ventured into the deepest and most contaminated areas and spotted several surreal sights, like random ostriches wandering the streets and dogs who'd survived by scavenging what food they could find, still patiently waiting for their masters years after being forcibly abandoned. And we can only say that those are all very, very good boys. Number 5, Centralia, Pennsylvania. Centralia in Columbia County, Pennsylvania, was once a coal mining town with about 1,500 residents. In 1962, an accidental fire started in the town dump, which then spread beneath the surface. The fire kept burning and, in fact, continues to burn to this day, forcing many people to evacuate due to the toxic environment. Only 63 people remained in 1990, and by 2012, the total population of the entire town was 10 10 people. During this time, 2 of the town's cemeteries literally fell into the raging inferno below, which we can only imagine was incredibly upsetting for the more, shall we say, religious denizens of the town, because that really does sound like some end time stuff, doesn't it? The graveyard literally falling into a raging inferno opening up below. And speaking of which, random sinkholes would appear in the town, leading to hellish, endless tunnels of flame below, and temperatures could inexplicably spike to heights of 900 Fahrenheit without warning, seemingly again at random. And as if this wasn't bad enough, people's houses began to tilt at awkward angles as the earth below them literally melted away, making selling them on Zoopla almost impossible. Thankfully, the government stepped in and just bought everyone's home and told them to move somewhere, anywhere else, deciding to simply let the town burn. And for anyone curious about why the town is still on fire, that aforementioned fire at the dump spread to a mine. Again, it's always a mine that was full of coal, and the coal veins caught fire, and according to experts, these could continue to burn for centuries, though they're really not sure. Today, Centralia looks like the first level of Doom Eternal, if any of you guys played that, with the cracked, dilapidated streets occasionally bursting open to reveal the fiery depths below, or belching toxic gases into the air with enough force to skin a moose. Experts suggest, as mentioned, that the fire continued to burn for centuries, but in reality, we really don't know how long it will be until the fire runs out of fuel, and the current hope is that the fire just gets bored and leaves. Moving on once again, number 4, New Indria, California. Founded during the California Gold Rush, New Indria sprung up to provide housing and amenities for the workers of a nearby mercury mine. And for anyone familiar with the toxicity of mercury, what we're about to say probably won't be all that surprising. Subpar mining and disposal practices, read they just dumped all of the rancid mercury slag into a nearby lake to make it nature's problem, resulted in the town and surrounding area being labelled a Resident Evil scale biohazard. The mine officially shut down in 1972, with residents of the town abandoning it soon thereafter. Now, the sheer amount of heavy metal poisoning present in the ground has resulted in the EPA stepping all of the way in to declare the whole town a Superfund site, which is just essentially the designation given by the agency to places where just telling them not to go isn't going to cut it, often due to the scale of the issue presenting a very real threat to people and areas nearby, which is happening in New Indria because all of the toxic heavy metal soup in the town's groundwater keeps leaching into nearby sources of running and drinking water. Great! Speaking of which, number 3, Bento Rodrigues, Brazil. Bento Rodrigues is a small village in Brazil, or at least it was, because it kind of just disappeared after an infamous and horrifying environmental disaster that happened there in 2015. Basically, the entire village was quite literally washed away by a 50-foot plus high wave of sludge formed of water and iron ore from a nearby dam storing wastewater from an iron mine. Again, it's always mines. In the years since the tragedy, the toxic mud has leached its lethal payload of contaminants into the earth, which in turn has leached into the region's most important water stream and polluted the drinking water supply for thousands of people. And as you've probably guessed, because capitalism, the company responsible for the disaster, Samarco, has refused to take any responsibility for it and tied up the surviving residents of the town in a legal battle they seem unlikely to ever win. As for the area, experts believe it will be contaminated with lethal or near lethal levels of contaminants for decades to come. Moving on again, number 2, Gilman, Colorado. Gilman, Colorado was a mining town established for the extraction of silver, gold, zinc and copper in Eagle County, Colorado. The town managed to thrive as a busy mining hub for about 99 years, with its mine yielding considerable amounts of gold and other metals that aren't gold. But that's not why we're here, so let's get to the good stuff. The discovery of heavy metals in the town's groundwater by the EPA in the 1980s led to the agency declaring the town a total write-off, erecting signs asking people to maybe consider not stepping foot within its boundaries, sporting ominous-sounding warnings like, and I quote, "hidden and visible dangers" in giant block text, which people obviously ignore to explore the town and see wonders like the bright orange river nearby. We mean, it's orange because of the lethal amounts of toxic slurry present within it in such abundance that the air itself is dangerous, but it's really, really orange. The residents of the town thankfully knew better than danger tourists, absconding in droves and leaving behind things like whole cars, which still stand there decades later, rusted tombstones and monuments to the hundreds of people whose lives were claimed by the mine before the danger it posed was made known to those most at risk. And finally, we move on to perhaps the most bizarre and horrifying entry on this list. Number 1. Love Canal, Niagara Falls. So we've evoked imagery from horror movies throughout this video, but what happened to the unsuspecting denizens of Love Canal literally sounds like it was ripped from the page of a low-budget horror movie, right down to the fact that the monster was hiding in their basement and killing them in devilishly gruesome ways. So the story here is that unbeknownst to the people of Love Canal, which prior to the disaster that made it infamous was described as a, and I quote, darling neighbourhood where people would swim the local river and do all manner of stereotypically suburban American things. A company called Hooker Chemicals and Plastics Corporation had literally dumped thousands of barrels of toxic waste into a landfill and the canal from which Love Canal took its name, and then just buried them all. Think the kind of stuff you see Mr. Burns doing in an episode of The Simpsons, and you're getting close to the kind of shenanigans that were going on with Hooker Chemicals and Plastics. Which already sounds kind of bad, right? Thousands of barrels of toxic waste just below the earth, but after they'd buried them all and covered them with dirt, the company then leased the land to, and I'm not making this up, the local Board of Education, who built a school in the aforementioned neighbourhood of Love Canal right on top of it. And right from the get-go, the residents of Love Canal would complain about the noxious smells and random evil-looking goo that would rise up from the ground when it rained. And this goo would also frequently leach into people's basements, literally melting through the concrete floors as the barrels of toxic waste buried below them rusted and split apart, allowing their lethal contents to make for the surface. And the whole thing came to a head in 1977 when a snowstorm resulted in just an unprecedented amount of water going into the ground, which saw some 20,000 tons of toxic waste rise out of the earth like a sentient blob of capitalism, intent on giving every resident of the town turbo cancer. As with a lot of the other entries on this list, the government stepped in, paid everyone to leave, and declared the whole area a complete write-off, by which I mean they told people not to go there and surround it with a flimsy, easily climbable chain-link fence with a sign on it. America. So I hope everybody at home found this video to be entertaining, informative, and educational. I certainly... Well, no, I'm not going to say that, because I wrote it. I wrote the bloody script. I do love writing, I do love research, and if you want to see me talking about stuff that I've written and researched myself, you can find links to Fact Fiend with Karl Smallwood, the channel that I run on the side, in the links down below. You can also find my social medias, and if you just Google my name, you'll find other articles I've written for TopTenz and for sites like Today I Found Out. But otherwise, we hope everyone liked this video. Leave a like, comment below with feedback, suggestions, all that good stuff. Like, subscribe for more content like this, and as always, go out there and have the day that you deserve. I guess, yeah, as well, if you fancy writing articles for us, it sounds like we're going to have space for a new author on TopTenz at very near point in the future, because I'm recording this before I told the guys behind the scenes all the issues I found with the script. So yeah,